At 2:47 a.m., Donald Trump published a post that most people dismissed as noise. Another late-night outburst, another grievance wrapped in bravado. But that reflexive dismissal may go down as one of the most dangerous misreads of power in modern political history. Because what Trump did in that moment did not merely offend allies or rile up headlines, it sent shockwaves through the Western financial and legal order, a system worth $27 trillion, painstakingly constructed since Bretton Woods to anchor global stability. And here's the part almost no one is saying out loud: this wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a calculated legal and economic maneuver, one that prosecutors should recognize immediately for what it was: witness intimidation on a geopolitical scale. What unfolded in the 72 hours that followed should alarm anyone who understands how real power actually operates, not rhetorically, not symbolically, but institutionally. Because the public narrative and the prosecutorial reality are not merely different. They exist in entirely separate universes. Let's walk through what actually happened. On January 23rd at 2:47 a.m. Eastern Time, Trump posted on Truth Social demanding that NATO allies pay their debts or face consequences. The message was blunt. If they didn't comply, America would decide unilaterally. Most commentators shrugged. Standard Trump bluster, they said. Campaign theatrics, empty threats. They were wrong, because within 6 hours, 3 extraordinary events occurred. Events that no serious prosecutor, intelligence analyst, or institutional observer would consider coincidental. First, the European Central Bank's Emergency Committee convened an unscheduled session. That does not happen because of a tweet. The ECB does not scramble its top decision makers unless it perceives a credible systemic risk. Second, Lloyd's of London suspended new sovereign debt insurance for 12 European nations. Let that sink in. A $4.2 trillion market froze overnight. That is not market jitter. That is institutional self-defense. Third, the German Constitutional Court fast-tracked a ruling on Germany's military spending framework, a case that had sat dormant for 8 months, suddenly receiving oral arguments scheduled for early February. Courts do not accelerate constitutional cases without external pressure. They respond to signals. This is not the velocity of reaction you get from a social media post, unless something far larger is moving beneath the surface. And this is where the analysis must turn prosecutorial. Donald Trump is not merely a political actor. He is a criminal defendant facing multiple ongoing investigations. The January 6th case may be stalled, but others are not. The classified documents case, obstruction inquiries, financial fraud investigations in New York, and parallel civil and criminal actions continue to grind forward. Every single one of those cases shares a critical dependency: international cooperation, Deutsche Bank records, Scottish property valuations, Middle Eastern financial flows, cross-border shell companies, foreign intelligence sharing. The Department of Justice does not casually obtain this material. It relies on mutual legal assistance treaties, on NATO-level intelligence coordination, on precisely the institutional framework Trump was now threatening to destabilize. Think about what that means. A defendant in multiple federal investigations just issued an economic and security threat against the very institutions that hold evidence against him. That is not politics. That is not rhetoric. That is obstruction, with a $27 trillion blast radius. From a prosecutor's perspective, this is like watching a target attempt to burn down the courthouse by threatening the fire department, while the public debates whether it's just campaign theater. But here's what almost no one is telling you. NATO allies began responding immediately, and not in the way the public expects. On January 25th, just 48 hours after Trump's post, the Netherlands Ministry of Justice made a stunning announcement. They would conduct a comprehensive review of all pending U.S. legal assistance requests. In diplomatic language, that translates to, "We are reconsidering cooperation." This matters enormously. The Netherlands is not a peripheral ally. It hosts the International Criminal Court. It processes thousands of U.S. subpoenas every year. It is a cornerstone of transatlantic legal infrastructure. When the Dutch hit pause, federal prosecutors hear alarm bells. Then came France. France's finance minister gave an interview that every DOJ attorney should study line by line. He stated plainly that France would continue to honor treaties with partners who honor their commitments. That is not a throwaway line. That is a conditional clause. It is a warning that legal cooperation is not automatic when national security is being threatened. Translation: you want our help? Stop threatening us. And then Germany. Germany's Federal Intelligence Service leaked deliberately that it was re-evaluating intelligence sharing protocols with nations showing unreliable alliance commitments. That is not symbolism. That is targeting data, financial intelligence, the evidentiary backbone of transnational fraud cases. Now ask yourself why this matters legally, because Trump is no longer just a former president or a candidate. He is a defendant, and defendants do not get to dismantle the evidence-gathering apparatus while under investigation. If you or I threatened institutions holding evidence against us, prosecutors would file emergency motions within hours. They would allege witness tampering, obstruction of justice, abuse of process. Careers would end, bail would be revoked. But because Trump does it through foreign policy signaling and social media, it gets misclassified as spectacle. Behind the scenes, however, the DOJ is watching this unfold in real time, and its options are narrowing. To understand the stakes, consider precedent. In 2016, the DOJ prosecuted Ukrainian oligarch Dmitry Firtash. The case required evidence from Austria, Cyprus, and the United Kingdom. It took 4 years, not because the facts were unclear, but because international legal assistance moves at the speed of diplomacy. Delay kills cases, statutes expire, witnesses vanish, financial trails go cold. Now apply that reality to Trump. The Manhattan DA's case against the Trump Organization required records from Deutsche Bank's Frankfurt headquarters, obtained under a treaty signed in 1986. If Germany decides that treaty is negotiable, if requests are slowed because the U.S. is threatening European security, those cases weaken immediately. The same is true in Scotland, where Trump's golf courses face financial scrutiny. The same in Panama, the same in Dubai, the same anywhere Trump-linked entities operated. This is the prosecutorial nightmare scenario, a defendant capable of weaponizing foreign policy to obstruct his own investigations. And there is precedent for this playbook. In 2019, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan faced U.S. sanctions over military actions in Syria. His response? He threatened to restrict access to Incirlik Air Base, a critical NATO facility. Within weeks, sanctions softened. That is leverage. That is how powerful defendants negotiate when prosecutors cannot reach them through conventional legal channels. Trump learned that lesson, and he is applying it with precision. Now we reach the point where this becomes a constitutional crisis. The DOJ operates on a foundational principle: no one is above the law. That is not a slogan. It is the architecture of American justice. But what happens when a defendant can threaten the institutions that enforce that principle? What happens when the target of an investigation can undermine the evidence pipeline itself? The DOJ has never faced this question at this scale, and the honest answer is unsettling. Because DOJ power depends entirely on institutional cooperation, both domestic and international. Strip that away, and you do not just weaken a case, you erode the rule of law itself. Understand this clearly. Trump's 2 a.m. post was not reckless. It was strategic. He is forcing prosecutors into a false dilemma: pursue accountability or preserve alliances. The moment prosecutors hesitate, the moment diplomatic blowback enters charging decisions, prosecutorial independence dies. And Trump knows it. He is not trying to win in court. He is trying to make the courtroom irrelevant. The second consequence is generational. If Trump succeeds, he establishes a blueprint. Every future defendant with sufficient power will point to this moment and ask, if Trump could do it, why can't I? That is how accountability collapses, not all at once, but by precedent. The third consequence is the most dangerous of all: the judiciary becoming functionally irrelevant. Judges can issue subpoenas, they can compel testimony, they can sanction obstruction, but they cannot force foreign governments to cooperate. If evidence is overseas and diplomacy is weaponized, what exactly is a court supposed to do? At that point, the rule of law becomes conditional, dependent on goodwill. And goodwill is not law. This moment is bigger than Trump, bigger than NATO, bigger than any single case. It is about whether the American legal system can hold powerful people accountable when those people possess the tools to dismantle accountability itself. Right now, the answer is not clear. The DOJ is boxed in, allies are recalculating, and Trump is exploiting the gap between law and power with surgical precision. From a prosecutor's perspective, this is the kind of moment that decides whether institutions endure or fail. Because if accountability depends on negotiation, it is no longer accountability. You cannot bargain with the rule of law. You either enforce it or you surrender it. And right now, that choice is playing out in real time, not in a courtroom, but in the aftermath of a 2:47 a.m. social media post. Let that sink in.